Hello everyone, and welcome to a Rise of Myth Cthulhu video, where today we're going to be taking a deep dive into the detective class, giving you some of the tips and tricks, some things you should know about it, so that when you go out you can be as prepared as possible to face the horrors of the great old ones. The detective class is a really great class for introducing players to this kind of game. I'm a huge fan of the fact that you've got a lot of great options for offensive options, you've got a lot of great defense, you've got cooperative cards. You're generally in a very good position to be supportive on a team, and you're also quite good on your own. You don't necessarily excel at any of the different aspects, but you've got access to a lot of tools that will let you really get to grips with what's going on and get familiar with the game very, very quickly. It's also a ton of fun to be playing with the big boomstick that comes with the arsenal of the detective. The unique mechanic for the detective class is called ammo. So certain weapons or cards will say discharge on them, and this basically means you have to reduce your ammo in order to play them. Ammo does not replenish between fights, and it does not replenish from shops. So be very careful what you're shooting at, because if you run into the Great Old One and you haven't got any ammo left, you might be in trouble. To start, let's take a look at the class relic. The class relic basically explains how this character plays. And what we can see here is that we start with 13 HP and 8 sanity. So when you are wounded, you will have defense 1. So this basically means every turn when you're at 5 or lower HP, which is when you're wounded, you will just get defense 1. The last line is just telling us that we set our ammo to 6 when we begin. The detective has quite a healthy pool of HP, so it's okay to take some risks and take some hits early on, especially with Sophia's cameo giving us access to the defensive point, and this will allow us to play a little bit more aggressively with our cards when we're playing in solo, or if we're with a team and we need to kill a monster pretty quickly. The key thing to note is that our sanity pool is very low. If you fall to 5 or lower sanity, this will trigger your character to go insane, and each character has a different debuff for when they're insane. For the detective, it basically reduces, it has a 50% chance of reducing the damage you would do using a weapon card, so a card that has discharge, by 2. This is horrifically bad that you just have a 50% chance to lose out on damage value. I'll talk a little bit about ways to evaluate rewards quickly as we go through in terms of energy costs to damage, but this is really bad, so you don't want to be insane. And this may help you with a little bit with deck building or making decisions in game on when or when not to do certain things. Let's start with the basic deck. I'll just pull out the cards now. There we go. And we'll grab these two, which I believe are our skill cards. And if I've done this correctly, yes, here we go. Awesome. So we'll start with our offensive cards, and then the rest of the cards in the deck are duplicates of the attack and defense cards. And then we will do our skill cards separately. I'll also actually separate this one because, as I said before, we'll talk a little bit about discharge in a moment. So your main attacking cards in the basic deck is punch and kick. Pretty straightforward. If you've got your bare hands, what are you going to be doing? Punch is a melee attack that costs 1 energy. You can see that in the top left. It deals 1 attack, and if you deal damage, which means you actually reduce the creature's HP by at least 1, you inflict a vulnerability. And the vulnerability is that green counter, and that basically means the next time that source would take damage, it takes that much damage plus 1, and then you remove the counter. So you can think of it as powering up your next attack. Punch is a great card for multiplayer when players can take turns playing their cards, so you can make sure that the punch gets through, and then you increase the amount of damage another player is going off with, which is very effective early at killing some of the bigger minions. It's a little bit harder to play this in solo because you have to reduce the HP of the creature in order to inflict the damage. So the challenge with that is that if they have guard, you're probably going to be punching off of the guard initially, or you've played your kick, for example, which is reduced to guard, and then you play punch, and the vulnerability goes away at the end of the creature's turn. So this can be a little bit tricky in single player, but it's great in multiplayer. On the other side of that, running around and kicking things to death is very, very strong when you're playing solo and a little bit less effective when you're in multiplayer. This is a 2 energy 2 attack card, and you add 1 attack if the enemy is targeting you. Of course, in solo play, you are going to be the center of attention, which makes this card absolutely fantastic. You'll be going around kicking people that decided to side with the old ones, or kicking mutated dogs to death relentlessly. This card is fantastic. What I really like about it is later in the game, it's still worth 2 energy to discard it. So even though you're not looking forward to playing it in any particular round, once you've crafted your deck a little bit more, it still has value in just being energy for your turn. Moving on to the discharge attack, or rather the weapon attack. This is 2 energy for 4 damage. So this is what I would call the golden ratio in Rise of Myth Cthulhu. Effectively, for every stat, you are looking to pay about half an energy. So for a 1 energy card, you want to be doing 2 damage. This card is 2 damage for 4 attack. So very much in vein of what I would consider an amazing card. Anytime you're looking at rewards, 1 energy for 2 stats, that could be 2 defense, that could be 2 attack, is a pretty good place to start. This will reduce your ammo by 1, and you do need to be careful in the early encounters that you don't get a little bit too overconfident using the shot and then running your ammo out before you start getting onto the harder fights. This card, however, can let you close out fights very, very quickly and take away some of the more problematic cards. When you, for example, get some minions that do some nasty debuffs and you need to kill one very quickly whilst defending, this is a great card to do that. We're going to take a look at the defensive cards now. We'll start with High Guard. High Guard is 1 defense for 1 energy, so this is not where you want to be a bit later in the game. However, what makes this card okay to have in your deck in the later stages of the game is that it has that +1 blue flame underneath. That means when you discard it, this gives you an extra energy. So this means it fits into your deck a little bit later on because it will let you play your other cards, and in the early stages it is still giving you a defense in a tight spot. If you combine that with Sophia's cameo, the pendant, this will basically allow you to have 2 defense very, very cheaply in the earlier stages of the game. So you should be fine, and then realistically later this just gets used to play your reward cards. So pretty standard, and this is an alright card. The other defensive card that's really strong on the detective initially, and then it's a card that scales off very, very fast, is the Acrobatics. So Acrobatics gives you defense free for 1 energy. So immediately this is taking you to Value Town. I love this. But there's a couple of drawbacks. One, this has to be the first card that you play, and it limits the number of attack and defense cards you can play this turn to 2, and this will be one of those 2 cards. So after you play this, you can only play 1 attack or 1 defense card with it. Skills are unaffected, so if you have a couple of skill cards in your hand, you'll be able to play those, but this is very, very strong early because it will give you enough defense for most of the lower tiers of creatures to basically prevent them from actually dealing damage to you. And then you get to basically play Acrobatics and kick something, or Acrobatics and shoot something. It's pretty strong, but in the later stages of the game, you're going to want to remove this by using the shop. When you get to the shop, you get the opportunity to remove cards. There's a couple of other ways to get cards out of your deck, and a big part of the skill will be trying to remove cards from your deck that are no longer useful to you, so you draw all the cards that you want more frequently. And on the other side of that, Punch is the other card you want to get out of your deck as quickly as possible. Lastly, we'll cover our 2 skills. We'll start with Reload. So Reload is a skill. It's a consumable. It basically just, when you play it, you increase your ammo by 1, and then for the rest of the fight, you remove the Reload from your deck. So each time you shuffle your discard pile back into your deck, you don't reshuffle this until the next fight. A big part of the skill for the detective is knowing where your reload is in your deck at any times. Is it in the next draw, or is it in the draw after that? That will tell you if it's okay to play shot, because you can end up in situations where you draw this in your opening hand, and then you draw shot on the second hand, and then the fight's going to be over and you don't get to reload. That will be really bad. That's how you start bleeding out ammo. What you ideally want to be doing is playing shot and then reloading before the fight ends. Also, very skillful play that you can do is figuring out if you can just defend for a turn to get your shot, to get your reload effectively before the end of the fight. You can generally take monster fights till turn 3 before they become a bit problematic, but in terms of actual monster combat strategies and stuff, that's a little bit beyond the scope of this video. We'll talk about that in a future one. But for now, let's get back into the skills, and we're going to take a look at detection. This inflicts a weakness and a vulnerability. We already discussed vulnerability a little bit earlier with Punch, so weakness. The weakness will reduce the amount of damage coming from that monster on its next attack by 1. So this, you can think of it as 1 energy for 2 stat points, because the vulnerability is a point of damage when followed up on, and the weakness is a reduction of damage. So this is a really great card, and it synergizes very well with some of the other classes when you're playing multiplayer. But you'll discover a little bit more about that in our future videos when we cover those classes. So that's the intro deck for the detective. We're going to move on and talk about some other options for this class. Next, we're going to talk about class items. So you don't normally get these by default, but if you are playing solo, you do get access to, let me just grab the correct card here. Here we go. You do get access to this card. And this card has 2 sides. You choose a side at the beginning of the game, and that will give you a boost. This effectively balances the game out so that when you are playing by yourself, it doesn't become a little bit overwhelming. On this side, we have the starting boost. This gives you a random class item, which we will talk about in just a second. It increases your maximum initial health by 2, which makes you very, very tanky. And then you get to replace 2 of your starter cards by 2 common cards. So, as we talked about with our punches and our acrobatics, we can go ahead and swap those out for common cards immediately, which are much better in terms of value to energy cost. So this is a really good one if you're new to the genre, or if you're new to this game in general. This is the one side. This is a side you want to start with and get familiar with the game as you're going through and picking up progress points for upgrades for future runs. The other side of this card is called the Long Path. You get a random class item, and that is the only reward you get until you beat a servant level enemy. And then what happens is every time you fight a servant level enemy, you get an uncommon card instead of a common card. These are very, very powerful, so much more so than the commons or the basic cards in your deck. So you're basically sacrificing your early benefit for a much more powerful deck later on. This is the one that you're probably going to want to take when you start playing through Act 1 with the intent of going into Act 2. And also when you get a bit more familiar with the game and you know what kind of creatures are coming out of the decks, this one's probably the preferred option. With that said, we need to now take a look at our class items. We have the club. This says each round, once per enemy, inflict a weakness with one of your melee attacks. It's weakness 1 with one of your melee attacks. So this basically reduces the amount of damage that comes in every time you hit somebody. So you're getting about half an energy of value every time you hit something. That's a pretty good conversion. It's pretty safe when you're starting out, if this is the class item you're dealt with. I think this trails off a little bit in the later stages because some of these are actually bananas. But club is a great starting point, and it also then can help decide some of the rewards that you're going to be choosing to take, maybe focus a little bit more on the melee attacks. Upgraded barrel is probably the best new player upgrade for the detective if you've not played before. This gives you +1 maximum ammo, so you'll begin the game on 7 ammunition. Your weapon attacks only reduce their damage by 1 if you're insane, so if you do fall below the sanity threshold, you have a 50% chance of losing half an energy on your attack, which makes it a lot more palatable than just missing wildly and having a turn completely backfire because you miscalculate by 1 point of damage. So the upgraded barrel, very, very safe option, great for you to start off with. These last two, I think, are the more powerful options for the detective, but they do affect the way you build your deck and the way that you're going to be pursuing the rewards throughout the game. The first is hand protection. This gives you defense 1 when you gain energy from a weapon card. So say we had our shot and we discarded it for 2 energy, we would get 1 defense for doing so. This is very, very good because it means that we can, when we're being careful with how we're playing our weapon cards, we're also getting defense for free, which then means we can spend our energy on offensive options rather than spending time protecting ourselves with things like acrobatics. Dead monsters deal no damage, so that's something to keep in mind. This is a really good one, and ultimately you only get value from it when you get a good mix of weapons and melee attacks in your deck to work with. But this is all around pretty solid, especially against the creatures that will hit the whole team if you're playing in multiplayer. This is the kind of thing that stops you taking that random damage that ends up creeping up on you and haunting you during the Great Old One fight. Lastly, the multi-purpose belt. This one is really good. You can go very heavily into the line of the ammunition cards, or the weapon cards, because your weapon cards gain an additional energy when discarded. So if we had that same shot from earlier, we can basically discard it for free energy. So as we can see, when we would discard this, we'd normally get 2, because that's what this red number says. And then with the multi-purpose belt, we get a blue flame, so we get free energy, which probably means I can play the rest of my hand off of this. This card is extraordinarily powerful. I really like this one, especially once you get familiar and you can focus on the fun part of the detective, which is lots of guns and lots of ammunition. Next, we're going to take a look at some reward cards. I'm not going to go through all the rewards, I'm just going to go through 3 for each tier, so you get a bit of an idea of the way I'd evaluate the cards and things to keep in mind as you are playing through Rise of Myth. You will go in and have different builds in mind, there'll be different things going on with your allies that may affect your build, but realistically, these are just some of the tips of the ways I evaluate cards and some of my favourite ones to look out for when you are progressing. Starting with the common cards, we're going to grab the top 3 here. So, the first one we have is Rapid Fire. Rapid Fire is a weapon attack that discards for 2 energy and costs 2 energy to play. It deals 5 attack or 3 attack against 2 different enemies and it discharges 2. So it does cost you 2 of your ammo to play this. This is very expensive, especially if you don't have other reload cards in your deck, because you remember we consume our reload from our deck, so that we can only get 1 ammo back per fight. If we're playing this, we're losing 2, so we are running a deficit in our ammunition. But this does kill the big ghoulies very fast, and this can conserve a lot of HP and a lot of sanity depending on the fight. This is also just another good one to get if you've got the hand protection class relic, or if you've got the utility belt, because you can just discard it for free energy and then have this super attack effectively while waiting in the wings for the earlier stages of the game. Later on, this trails off pretty hard. It's generally quite expensive to use 2 ammunition for only 5 damage, but just getting up to those later stages of the game, this is a great card to do so. Technique is a permanent skill, so when you play a permanent skill, you just put it here and it stays in front of you for the rest of the fight, and this adds attack 1 and defense 1 to your melee cards and defense cards. I really like this because it basically means your kick's got the 4 damage, which is the golden ratio. It means that your high guard gets to the golden ratio, and it just makes all of your cards just a little bit more spicy. And it doesn't go, this card, because it's a permanent skill, doesn't get placed into the discard pile and shuffled back into the deck. So your deck stays pretty small while you have this in front of you, and it makes all of your other cards better. And you're effectively adding half an energy's worth of value onto every card that you play, which is over 3 or 4 cards. Well, I play 2 cards and you've already gained the value of this card back, which is fantastic. Lastly, we're going to take a look at Fast Reload. Fast Reload is a consumable. So after you play it, you remove it. It costs 0 energy. Keynote, this discards for 0 energy as well, so it means it can't help you play any of your other cards. The other effect of this is if you're wounded, you can regain 1 health, which is very good. Sustain in this game is king. You don't want to focus too much on filling your deck up with healing cards without being able to deal damage, but being able to grab healing from indirect sources while you're trying to do other things, those cards are very powerful. Fast Reload is a great card to get into your deck, especially if you're focusing more on the weapon side of the detective. And even if you're focusing on being more of the defensive character for your team, being able to heal while you're wounded is great. You can use your +1 guard from your Sophia's cameo, and then you get +1 health to get you out of wounded, which is pretty useful in the long run. Now we're going to take a look at the uncommon cards. The uncommon cards, I'm just going to grab these 3 and we'll talk about these. Now, I do want to state that these cards are a lot more powerful in the game, and if you have the base version of Rise of Myth Cthulhu, this is the top tier that you will get. And these cards, these really should be rare, and I will say the rare cards probably should have been legendary if I was renaming them, but these are all fantastic, and I get really excited about these cards whenever I see them. Firstly, we're going to take a look at what goes around. What goes around is a 2 energy card. It's an attack 6, discharge 1. So now you can sort of see what I was saying before, that discharge 2 for 5 damage is pretty low. We have to keep in mind that this is an uncommon card, so we're not going to be seeing this until much later in the run, or a little bit earlier if we took the long path and we're playing solo. But in addition to having attack 6, which will kill most things in one shot, you have a coup de grace effect, which means if you kill the enemy with this card, you get the extra effect, which means whoever the enemy was targeting regains 1 health. So this can heal your teammates, or if you're playing solo, it's just gain a health whilst killing something that was going to hurt you. This is just basically all upside. The discharge 1 means we can support it with our 1 reload, and there's a couple of other options to reload, including the next card we're going to talk about now. Overall, this is a fantastic card. This is premium, and if I saw this come down into my rewards pile, to when I'm choosing which card to take, this is probably going to be one of my priority cards in the detective. This card is fantastic. Next up, we're going to take a look at a safe place. It is a 2 energy card. It's a defensive card that gives you defense 3 for 2 energies. So that's a little bit lower than what we would hope for on the stats, but we get reload 1 and we get draw card. This is also not a consumable, so this stays in the deck so you can draw it in future rounds. I really like this. First of all, the draw 1 effect is very, very powerful for letting you get through the deck faster. It means that when you add this to your deck isn't getting any bigger, which makes it very, very strong. The idea in these types of games is you want to keep your deck as small as possible so that you get to your more powerful cards as frequently and as fast as possible. And this card is great for that, and being able to reload whilst defending and then fire off a what goes around is very, very good. And it basically means that if you're playing this more than once in a fight, you can support playing multiple discharge effects, which is just going to allow you to clean up the fights very, very quickly. So this is a great card. Next, we're going to be taking a look at It All Fits. Now, It All Fits is a melee attack and a defensive card. So if there's certain cards that mention an attack or a defense, it will always count this card. It's also a melee attack, so if you remember the skill we looked at before, this would also get improved by that. This is attack 3 and defense 3, so you're immediately getting 6 points of stats for 2 energy. That is really, really crazy value. I don't think I can state that enough how good that is for the energy conversion. And you also get to choose one. You can regain a sanity or you can reload. This is king. Being able to regain a sanity on a class that has very low base sanity can keep you out of being insane, which will then stop a whole bunch of bad things happening. It will stop you losing the game if your sanity drops too low. And you also can just choose reload 1 if you don't need the sanity. It's very hard not to be really happy about grabbing this card at any stage of the game. If free defense is a lot, free attack is reasonable, and then having some kind of sustain is just really, really powerful. So this is a fantastic card. When you get your rewards, I think I probably have what goes around at the very top of my list, and then these two are the next two, depending on what my deck is. I'd probably take It All Fits over a safe space. If all 3 of these cards came down, it would always be this one. If there was a different card, it would probably be It All Fits and then a safe space. These are like the premium options, the way that I look at things, but it does also kind of depend a little bit on your deck and what your class items are, and a couple of other factors. And now we're going to take a look at some of the rare cards. So these come into play when you get to Act 2, and the difficulty of the game scales dramatically. And if you kind of want to get a bit of a preview, if you haven't looked at the Act 2 part of the game yet, you can kind of gauge how difficult it's going to get based on how good these cards are. So you get your first rare reward card for defeating the Great Old One. So the first one we're going to look at is the Executioner. The Executioner is a weapon attack. It's attack 5 for 2 energy, which is great. Coup de grace. Attack 5 against another enemy. There are no limits to the coup de grace uses. It's just discharge 1 for each attack. So if there are 3 minions in play, for example, and they are all less than 5 health, you can just literally one-shot them by just spending all your ammunition. Absolutely incredible card for dealing with some of the bosses, for example, that have minions. This is very good for cleaning up fights where you've got a scary monster and 2 smaller ones. You can essentially just go down the whole line and soften them up This is a great card for those fights. It's a great team play card as well, especially when you're playing cooperatively. You're going to see that there's going to be a lot more minions in play at any given time, and this can effectively let you sweep up, especially if you've managed to pick up a couple of other reload cards in your deck. You'd be able to support this, but if you're heavily playing the Executioner, you will run out of ammo, just so you know. Next up, we're going to take a look at Ammo Stash. So Ammo Stash is a 1 energy permanent skill, so that will just sit in front of you after you've played it. It also discards for 2 energy, which means it's incredible. Effectively, you can discard it for free energy, but why would you ever be discarding this card, is what you should be asking yourself. At the start of your turn, you reload 2 and you regain a sanity. This is just madness. Reload 2 means that you're going to be able to support all of your weapons for the rest of the game. You won't even need the reload cards. You could actually just go through and probably remove those cards from your deck from future shops, because this will just sit in front of you doing everything. Also gaining the sanity back with this low sanity pools we've discussed before. Very, very powerful. Love this card. This card is great, and it's a hard payoff card if you've been building heavily into the weapon effects. And lastly, we're going to take a look at the Protector. So the Protector is a defensive card. It costs 3 energy. This is the most expensive card we've looked at so far. It gives you defense 10, and then all enemies have to target you, and you put a weakness on all enemies. So if there were 3 enemies, you get defense 10, and you'd also get 3 weaknesses, which would reduce the damage coming in by 3. You're getting really, really good value on this. Even if you're only getting 6 defense, that would be fair, but obviously we're playing with the rare cards, we want a bit of a better exchange rate. This is just really, really good team card. And it's also pretty useful if you are playing solo against some of the minion heavy bosses. This can effectively just blank out a turn, depending on what the bosses are doing, and also put some weakness status effects down, which just basically gives you 13, defense 13 effectively for free energy. So can't really go wrong with that. So that's been a review of the detective class for the game. We hope you've enjoyed this video. If you've had a chance to play, we'd love it if you could share some of your tips to other detective players down below, or if you disagree with anything I've said, it would be great to hear from you. And just tell us your general thoughts. We'd love to hear anything you have to say about the game. But for now, we're going to be signing off, so we'd invite you to subscribe to the channel so you can keep up to date. We will be posting more videos on all of the classes, doing this big deep dive, so that when you get to playing the game and you want to start leveling up and playing through on harder difficulty settings, you have the best footing to do so. But for now, we're going to be signing off. Thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you next time. Cheers.